Hi there. Today's book is called Spaghetti Smiles by Margot Sorensen, illustrated by David Harrington. Spaghetti Smiles. Jake rushed into Rocco's Italian restaurant. "Uncle Rocco," Jake said, "I have a new book to read to you." "Ciao, Jake," Uncle Rocco said. "I don't think you'll be able to read to me in the restaurant anymore. I have big problems." "What happened?" Jake asked. "My restaurant needs a new neighbor. We need someone who likes to have fun," Uncle Rocco said. "What happens if you don't find one?" Jake asked. "I would have to close my restaurant," Uncle Rocco replied. "No more reading time for us." Uncle Rocco tried to make happy faces on the pizzas, but the pepperoni smiles wilted. Jake exclaimed, "I'll find you a neighbor." "But everybody knows this is a crazy, mixed-up restaurant," Uncle Rocco said. "Everyone likes to eat here and have fun," Jake said. "Remember how we play spaghetti pick-up sticks and bowl with mozzarella balls knocking over olive oil?" Uncle Rocco added. "Who wouldn't want to be next door?" Uncle Rocco asked, juggling ravioli. First, Jake went to see Mrs. Cash at the bank. She was working at the front desk. "Miss Cash," Jake said, "would you like to move the bank next door to Rocco's Italian restaurant?" "I don't think so, Jake," she said. "Why not?" he asked. "Bank customers would get pepperoni slices instead of quarters. I'd find rows of pizzas baking in the bank vault." Jake sighed. "But tell Rocco," Miss Cash said. "It's the best Italian food in the town." Jake thanked Mrs. Cash and left the bank. She definitely needed some pizzas baking in her bank vault. Jake opened the post office door. Mr. Stampley was stamping envelopes. "Mr. Stampley," Jake called, "why don't you move the post office next door to Rocco's Italian restaurant?" "Move next door to Rocco? I don't think so," said Mr. Stampley. "Why not?" Jake asked. Mr. Stampley said, "Pepperoncini on envelopes instead of stamps? Lasagna would be airmailed all over the world." He grinned at Jake. "But tell Rocco, I'll be there for dinner." Jake thanked Mr. Stampley. He'd asked Rocco to mail him some lasagna just for fun. Jake walked to Mr. Pumper's gas station. Mr. Pumper was tinkering with a car. "Hi," Jake said. "Wouldn't you like to move in next door to Rocco's Italian restaurant?" "My gas station?" Mr. Pumper asked. "The gas pumps would pump tomato sauce instead of gas. Customers would get olive oil added to their engines instead of motor oil." He looked at Jake. "Nope. But tell Rocco his spaghetti is still the greatest." Jake sighed. Just think how smoothly an engine would run after it got its olive oil. Jake walked farther and farther. His head sank lower and lower. Finally, he stood at the very edge of town and looked back down Main Street. He could see Uncle Rocco's restaurant. The bright red and green and white sign looked cheerful, but Jake didn't feel cheerful at all. He sat down on a bench to think. As he looked up, he read the sign on a new store in front of him. Bright red and green letters spelled out Page's Bookstore. Maybe a bookstore would work. "A customer! A customer!" a roly-poly lady exclaimed. "I'm Mrs. Page. Welcome to my new bookstore. I didn't think anyone in this town read books. No one comes in here," she said. "Doesn't anyone like to have any fun?" she asked. "I'm Jake," Jake said. "My uncle owns Rocco's Italian restaurant. I didn't come in here to buy a book," he admitted. Mrs. Page's face lost its smile. "You didn't come to buy a book?" she asked. But wait, Jake said. I'm looking for a new neighbor for my Uncle Rocco's restaurant in the middle of town. In the middle of town? Mrs. Page repeated slowly. She looked thoughtful for a moment. Everyone would buy your books and then eat next door, Jake said. Or they would eat at Rocco's first, then they could buy a book from you for dessert. But what if people use pasta for bookmarks? Mrs. Page asked. Or find anchovies on the shelves? Jake said, if people are having fun reading books, what does it matter? Oh, she exclaimed, wonderful! I'll help you find books to read. It's a deal, he said. Thank you. He hurried back to Uncle Rocco. Uncle Rocco, he called, I found the perfect neighbor for your restaurant, Mrs. Page and her new bookstore. Everyone in town will line up to eat at your restaurant. Then they can buy a book next door. Mrs. Page promised to help me find good books to read to you. I can't wait to hear you read, Rocco said, grinning. Come. Jake followed Rocco into the kitchen, and together they turned all the pepperoni mouse on the pizza into a curvy smile. The end.